Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be turning this pillowcase into a vintage style blouse inspired by this. This is a vintage pattern from, I'm guessing, the late 50s or early 60s, but I could be wrong. I found this image on Pinterest, but I can't actually figure out where it originally came from, so I'm not 100% sure of the date. Whatever the case, it looked like a relatively simple blouse, and since the warm weather is now coming, I thought I would try and make it with you guys. Now, I do personally have a mannequin, and you could make this on a mannequin, but for the sake of people who do not have one, I'm going to try making it just like laid out on the floor. So without further ado, let us begin. So since I'm using a pillowcase, it's already like in a rectangle, which is basically what we need to begin with. But I do need to adjust the size of the rectangle a little bit to make it fit me more precisely. For the width of this rectangle, I'm going to take half of my chest measurement. In this case, when I say my chest measurement, I actually mean a little bit more than that because you don't want this to fit you super duper tightly. It's supposed to, you know, not be suffocating you. For the other dimension of the rectangle, I basically just need it to be from where I want the shoulder of the blouse to be down to where I want the hem to be. So this is a little bit of your choice. Earlier, I actually put this pillowcase onto my mannequin to see how the dimensions were, and the length actually seemed pretty good, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Now I'm going to cut this out, leaving a little bit of a seam allowance. Okay, here's the rectangle that I have, but since it was a pillowcase, there's a seam right here and the fabric is folded right here, so I'm just going to cut those so that it's actually two separate rectangles. Okay, so for the moment, I'm just going to take one of the rectangles, and this is going to become the front of the blouse. And because this piece is going to be symmetrical, I'm just going to fold it in half lengthwise. Now I'm going to measure from the top of my shoulder down the front to my armpit. And for me, that's about 8 inches. Now I'm going to take that measurement and mark it from the top of this open side downwards. This is going to be the top of the chest dart. I am a very flat-chested human being, so I am just going to sort of eyeball this and make it a super tiny little dart. But if you need to be a little bit more precise about it, what you need to do is take your bust measurement minus your under bust measurement divided by 2. Now whatever number you come out with, you're going to measure that downwards from this first mark. Now I'm going to draw a line going straight across, starting at this first mark that we made. Now I'm going to measure between where each of the darts are going to go. This basically means measuring from nipple to nipple. And I'm going to divide that measurement by 2. Now whatever number that is, I'm going to mark that along this line, starting at the fold. Now I'm going to draw a straight line going from this second mark we did on the open side of the fabric to the mark we just made. Now you probably can't see very well, but I have a little triangle drawn right here. That's going to be the chest dart. I'm going to outline it with a pen so that you can see it a little better. Keep in mind that you're not actually going to be cutting along these lines, you're going to be sewing along these lines. So if your dart is a little bit bigger, you're going to want to cut a little bit inside of the triangle to create your seam allowance. But if your dart is on the smaller side like this, you're not even going to need to cut it at all. You do have to draw it on the other side of the fabric as well. Now for the back piece. In the picture, I can't actually see what the back looks like, so I'm just going to sort of make something up. Overall, it's actually going to be quite simple. The reason we don't need to worry about the waist for this blouse at all is because it's sort of designed to be tucked into a skirt. All I want is for this to have a little bit of a V in the back. So we're once again going to fold it in half. Now I don't want to just cut the V straight from this corner downwards. I need to leave a little bit of it flat right here because that's where the straps are going to be attached later. So I'm going to go maybe like 2 of my seam allowance away from the edge. You can make this V as extreme as you want or as subtle as you want. Or I guess if you want to, you don't even need to do the V at all. Now I'm going to go back to the front piece for a minute. I'm just going to fold it in half again. Now the only thing we need to do is cut a little sort of curve where your arm is going to go. This sure doesn't really have arm holes, but it kind of does. Starting somewhere around 1 or 2 seam allowances above where the top of the dart is, I'm going to make a little mark. Now from there, I'm going to draw the curve. I'm just going to eyeball it. It's a little bit tricky to mathematically figure out exactly how to do this. Just sort of picture in the shirt, is your arm going to fit comfortably in this curve? And this kind of thing with a shirt that doesn't actually have sleeves, I don't really think it matters all that much. It doesn't need to be super duper precise, so I'm just going to sort of guess. And I think that that'll be good. Then cut out the curve with a little bit of seam allowance. And you don't need to do any sort of arm cutout on the back piece. Now that both of the pattern pieces are done, let's start sewing them together. Hello, it's actually another day, but let's start sewing together this blouse. I'm gonna start by sewing the darts in the front piece, and basically what you're gonna do is fold these darts so that both of the lines of the triangle match up. So you can see right there where I've drawn the triangle, and I'm basically gonna fold this so that I can see the line matching up on both sides. And now I'm just gonna pin those lines together. And now when I flip it over, you can see where the dart is right here. And this is of course going on the front, so you can see right there how that just helps the piece fit me a little better. Even if you literally have no chest, I'm gonna pin the other dart the same way and then sew it using a back stitch. Alright, I've finished sewing the darts together, and now you'll see right here on the edge, there's like a little bit of mismatching. This main part of the fabric is a little bit longer than it is right here at the top. This is the armhole. If you have a bigger chest, you're probably going to want to start by making your whole front piece wider than you think you need to, because this mismatch might be a little bit more extreme and you might have to cut off quite a bit from the sides. I'm not super great with patterning for larger chests since I don't have one, so I recommend just giving it a little bit more leeway as far as the width of this piece, and then once you sew the darts together you can adjust it a little more. That's pretty much all I need to do for the front piece, and now I'm going to attach the sides of the front piece and the back piece. To do that, I'm going to line up the front and the back at the hem, and I'm just going to put the pieces right side together and do another back stitch to close this seam. Okay, so here we have the very basic situation of what's happening with this blouse right now. I just pinned the shoulders because they don't have those little ties yet, but I've sewed up the sides and the armholes fit quite nicely. Pretty much all that's left to be done for this, aside from those little ties on the shoulders, is the actual finishing of the edges, like hemming the armholes and the neckline. So if you've never hemmed something before, here's the basic method that I like to use. At the edge of the fabric, I just fold over maybe like 1/3 of a centimeter, and then I fold that over one more time, and then you sew it down with a straight stitch. You can do a running stitch or a back stitch. For this, I usually like to use a running stitch because it's faster and I don't usually have issues with it like breaking or coming undone. So I'm going to start hemming all of the raw edges, and then tomorrow we can make the straps and attach them and the blouse will be done. Alright, it's another day. Now let's make the shoulder ties. I've cut out these strips. These are maybe like 1.5 inches wide, and I have 2 of them, but I need to have 4 so that there's 2 little sort of straps on each shoulder for me to tie together. So I'm going to cut each of these in half. Now what I'm going to do to turn these into actually nice clean straps, I'm going to lay it down and fold over one of these edges, then fold over the other, and then fold the whole thing in half. And then I'm going to pin it like that so that it stays. I'll just show you one more time. Fold over one of the edges towards the middle, and then the other edge, and then fold it all in half. If you want, you can just use a whole ton of pins and pin it as you go and then sew it, or you can sort of do the folding as you're doing the stitching. I usually do the latter, but I'm going to try pinning it first this time and see how it goes. To do the actual stitching, you can do a whip stitch or an invisible stitch on the edge to make it stay closed, and then you can take the pins out. The whip stitch is a little bit faster, but the invisible stitch looks a little cleaner. Since this blouse is sort of supposed to be an example of a really fast, really easy vintage style sewing project you can do, I'm going to try doing the faster stitch, the whip stitch. At the end you can see how it's sort of a raw edge, and to fix that I'm going to sort of fold that inside. Generally speaking, with whip stitches, smaller is better because the thread is sort of like on the outside, so it can get caught on things if the stitches are too big. If you find pins to be a little bit annoying while you're sewing, but you also don't want to do the folding while you're doing the stitching, you can also iron this sort of folding situation in place so that you don't have to do as much work as you're stitching. Here are my 4 little straps, and on this last one that I just did, I kept the thread attached since I'm just about to sew it onto the blouse anyways. So here I have the corner of one of the shoulders on the blouse, and I'm just going to use a whip stitch to attach this little strap there. So there I have one of the straps attached, and I'm just going to attach the other 3, and then the blouse will be finished and we can go to the reveal. That's the finished result of this 1950s style blouse. If you're trying to get into vintage fashion, I hope that this video can help you somewhat, because it can be really difficult to find vintage style clothing that's not either super cheap and super low quality or super duper expensive. So this is a nice in-between, literally just made with a pillowcase and some thread. This is a pretty easy garment to make, and I would consider it to be quite beginner friendly. It is made of very basic shapes for the most part. Another great staple vintage garment is a circle skirt, which can be really difficult to find at an affordable price. So if you want to know how I made the circle skirt that I'm wearing right now and that you saw in the reveal, I will put the link over there. The only downside to this blouse is that it can be a little bit tricky to figure out what bra to wear with it, since usually you can see the straps. If you don't mind being able to see the straps, that's totally fine, but if you don't want to see them, then I recommend probably like a strapless bra of some kind. Real quick before I finish off the video, I'd like to mention that I have an Etsy shop called Gwen's Vintage Box, where I'm selling vintage and antique curated boxes themed after different colors, as well as some individual vintage items and some handmade accessories. So the link will be in the description if you want to check that out. That would be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Where did I put my pencil? Too good at losing things. Just waiting for the blender to end.